spinning. And we're live. Okay, awesome. We made it.
Yay!
So one of our, I think this is our first live from different cities. So this is fun. Took us a little bit to figure it out, but here we are. All right.
You
Thanks
figured
again.
it out.
I'm going to turn down the volume just to hear. Let me know if you hear any echo. I heard a little bit of echo. So, all right. We're on. Let's talk. So, the title of this is How to Stay Mentally Strong in a World That is Spinning. All right. That's a big title. There's a lot to that. First thing, though, let's introduce you again to anybody who doesn't know who you are.
Hi there. I'm Heather Wells.
Awesome. And Great Balance. There we go. And you have multiple locations, right?
I do, in Dallas and Houston.
Awesome. Okay. And then the other exciting news you have is you have a book coming out, right? Like when is it coming out? Where can people find it?
I can now tell you that it's going to be May. We're waiting on some graphics, but it will be on Amazon.com. There are numerous nonprofits that are also going to be posting it. Bryan's House. There are several. Others are still reaching out. And it will be in a few bookstores. I'll keep everyone updated, but Amazon.com is definitely the place. And I'm building out the hiddenchurn.com since the book is called The Hidden Churn. Right now that's under construction. So that'll be another place. And I will have value add items on there that I will continually add to as well. Very cool. I love it.
All right. So you today specifically wanted to talk about mental health. That's an important time. It's always important, right? But there's certainly seasons where it can, we see more people struggling, right? Holidays. I didn't know this, but I guess this time change actually is very impactful for people. And well, it makes sense from a sleeping perspective and just neurodevelopmental aspect. But it's my understanding just like the whole population struggles with this. And so let's talk about this. What's on your heart today?
Well, mental health is always on my heart. But a few weeks ago, I got a call from a nonprofit that I have worked with because a very well-known member of the community, a do-gooder, just always happy, uplifting everyone else, was struggling. And it was a matter of let's find this person and get the help they need. And it was just all hands on deck locating and it really got me to thinking about the kids that we talk about all the time who have, lack of communication among areas of the brain or between the body and the brain, because this is a man who is facing a whole lot of very difficult family struggles, some terminal diagnoses, some financial struggles. What happens with our kids who have brain imbalances, who have rubber bands around their spinal cord where the messages aren't going? And so much of what we've talked about before impacts mental health in a very direct way. So I thought it would be good to really tie those things together. In this particular case, he was put on medication for depression and anxiety, and his body did not respond well to it. And it actually made things worse. And so what can we do holistically to prevent that from being necessary? And people need to know about that happens a lot, where medications that are intended for a specific purpose actually have the side effects are the very things that they're trying to help sometimes. So
try to avoid,
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to blank on the name of the book. I'll try to put it in the post, but it was a book that I was reading, and he kind of details his whole journey, but he talks about how, really these drugs really only have a short-term, benefit if there is a benefit.
Right.
And then unfortunately, if you're on them for long periods of time, then the consequences of those end up to be worse or the same. And so that is absolutely, but you're speaking to me right now because a lot of my kiddos who are on, on ADHD medication or other things, they struggle because they feel like they're being pushed down or suppressed, like they don't feel like they can express themselves. Like they feel like they're being overpowered by something is kind of the idea that I always get from them. And so
Yes.
they come in frustrated.
Yes. The two boys that I took in were on ADHD medications, and they were zombies on the medication. They had really lost any sense of self that they did have, which it was already struggling for all the things that we talk about all the time. I have families regularly, and here's the thing is, if I get sick and am put on an antibiotic, there's going to be all of these health warnings, and you have a 1 in 30 million chance of XYZ happening, and we know it's remote, but it is very, very common to have profound side effects from these medications. It is not uncommon that I have families coming in saying, my child became paranoid. They thought that everyone was after them. They felt they were hallucinating, spiders crawling on their arms. They couldn't sleep, or they're just an emotional roller coaster as the meds wear off. And so I think it's important to think about, again, you and I have both said sometimes medications are necessary, and we're not anti-med in all circumstances, but people need to be really aware of the pros and cons and the things to look out for with those.
Yeah, and we get kids and they come in and they're zombies, right? So, well, their heart goes out to the kiddo, right? Because their kid, they can just see that's a different kid, right? And so they go on medication for 4 or 5 days, and then they take off during the weekend, and then they go back on. And you have to think about it from a biological standpoint, just like the on and off of this medication, and what it does to the brain, to the organs, to the endocrine system or the hormonal system. It just throws it into this tumultuous up and down and dysregulation, to the point where these kids are they're frustrated. I mean, they don't want to be on the medication. That's what I love this medication. Please keep me on it. They're mostly like, I'm a zombie. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I can't sleep. My diet is like, these kids aren't eating as well. So it's not like these kids aren't happy with being on it. They're stuck on it, and their teachers and the schools are saying, well, they can't be in the classroom. And then the parents like, well, what do I do? And so we have this big emotional, like, I don't want to be on it, but I'm being forced to be on it. And then we're not, we're taking it in days and coming off. And that, that's certainly not how medication is designed to be taken. And so we have this whole, it's a mental health crisis in and of itself with these diagnoses. It's frustrating.
It is. And when you think about, Harvard Medical School said the body and the brain and the GI system should be considered one system. They're so intertwined. The fight or flight system is made up of many of the same cells that make up our, the limbic system and the digestive system are made up a lot of the same cells. 85% of the kids that we see have food sensitivities or food allergies. And it's because...
Can you go back a second? What was that? Same cells. I didn't catch that.
This about the cells? Is that what you said?
Yeah. You're saying the limbic system and the...
Yeah, and the GI system are made up of a lot of the same cells. And so 85% of our kids have issues with digesting food. And so you can imagine that they're also going to have issues properly absorbing medications. I mean, if they're having difficulty with what they eat and drink, that's going to apply to medicines as well. Yes. Right. And so a lot of the kids that come in are vitamin D deficient, or they need omega-3s or whatever. They have all of these other things, because we talk about the sensory motor system all the time. So if you see awkward, clumsy movements, and sometimes they look athletic, but they still have sensory motor issues, that's also going to affect the intestinal motility and breaking the foods down, as well as the medications. Yeah. The sense of smell. If I smell food correctly and taste it correctly, saliva is released in my mouth that helps break down the food. And so even having a sense of smell that's off, the kids who gag at smells, or all food tastes the same to them, they never even comment about how anything smells, that actually can impact digestion as well. Spinal gallant, one of our primitive reflexes, very involved in the GI system, as well as sleep and bedwetting. And And so it's just important for families to realize that, in all of my experience and also just logic from them having difficulty with food allergies and sensitivities and breaking foods down, a lot of them have leaky gut, but even when it's not that severe, they might have constipation, diarrhea, that to really the things to look out for with the meds. Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there. Okay. I got touch on. I think what you just said there was one of the most phenomenal things I've ever heard anybody say, in the sense that if you have trouble digesting and absorbing food and breaking it down, I don't know how anybody doesn't understand that you're going to struggle with other things like medication. Right. You're not going to metabolize it correctly. It's not going to do its job. Why is nobody else talking about this, Heather? Why are we having this conversation, but I don't hear anybody else having this conversation? I want to pull my hair out.
I know. I think, so much of it has to do with people. It's kind of like the frog in the frying pan. I remember my dad was a preacher, as you know, before his brain tumor. And he talked about the frog in the frying pan in a sermon when I was a little girl, and how that frog could so easily jump out of there. But when you turn the heat up slowly enough, the frog ends up frying to death without jumping out. What we accept as normal and okay, you don't know how. We talk about churning all the time. You don't know how hard you're churning until you're not doing anymore. So you get used to your child having difficulty with, they just have constipation, they have diarrhea, poor little thing. We just, that's not okay. That signals that something is wrong. But part of it, I think it comes from a healthy place with people, is instead of getting bogged down in negativity, this is our normal and we just have to accept it. I think it comes from a very well-meaning place, and people just don't realize that things that we're accepting as being, that's just the way it is, don't have to be that way. And there are things we can do to help. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I just don't get why that's not discussed. It's so frustrating to the parents. The parents are kind of locked in this, like, they don't know what to do and they're being told this. But when you do an evaluation on somebody, I ask them how their gut health is all the time. Like, are they eating? Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
What is their digestion like? Are they vomiting? Do they have diarrhea? What is going on? Are they food sensitivities? All this stuff. And when you come down to it, these kids all have gut issues for the most part. It's basically every kid you see has a gut issue. And then they're on medications, and then they're bouncing between medications. So we want to talk about mental health. We know the gut and the limbic system connected intimately, right? And then we're throwing them on different medications because this one's not working. But if we could fix the gut, look at this. We've solved 90% of the problem here at some point.
Yeah.
Here, maybe I would pull it up. So.
Yeah. And then, when you think about, even aside from the gut, which is super extremely important, what about us taking care of the communication in the different areas of the brain and between the body and the brain, the spinal cord, where some of these thought patterns don't begin in the first place? Think about the executive functions that we've talked about, flexibility. Flexibility is not just important for completing a job or for doing your schoolwork. It's not just about emotional regulation, so I don't just go from 0 to 60. It is also part of hope, having agency. I had a setback, but there's a way around it. Right. When the brain is communicating and the body and the brain are communicating together the way they're supposed to, we don't get into these ruts of thinking. We're not as likely to do so. There are several, I consider about 9 major thought processes that develop as a result of brain imbalances or issues in the spinal cord, which that's your area of expertise. But like all or nothing thinking, I never can say this word, I always want to say catastrophizing, but that I always add an extra syllable, but I said it anyway. But we get into these ruts of thinking. And so when something happens, if I'm bad at school, I'm just stupid. Not, I am good in all of these things, and we all have areas of strengths and weaknesses. So executive function is also mental health. Executive function can prevent suicide and really severe depression and anxiety. All of those, self-regulation. Sometimes kids, because we've talked about before, a lot of times kids cannot separate what they do from who they are. If they make bad choices because they're impulsive, that impulsivity, we don't have the brake pedal in the brain, I'm just bad. And so I don't even deserve to live, or, that kind of thing. And it just spirals. And the longer we go without addressing the root causes of these issues, those kinds of thought patterns become 200-year-old oak trees in their brain. And so the sooner that we can create the right pathways, grow neural pathways based on neuroplasticity, you get rid of the rubber bands, or however you want to talk about it, around the spinal cord, we start growing new trees.
Yes.
And when we first do that, those trees are neural pathways. When we first do that, those subdivisions that have pretty trees, but they're held up by sticks, they're going to be cool someday. They're not doing much right now, but they're cute. We got to water and fertilize and grow those. And there's just so many things that we get those started, and then we can empower the parents and educators to water and fertilize those. So those become the trees that take over the thought processes in the brain instead of the unhealthy ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we were talking about the gut, but I want to preface that I think the brain-body connection comes first, because that has such an immense impact on the gut that needs to be corrected. And I think that's what we're saying right here.
100%, yes. That's what causes, the fact that 85% of the kids with brain imbalances have gut issues. You can change the food, and that's important, or you can balance the brain and get all the communication between the body and brain right, and a lot of that takes care of itself. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I just had a little girl come in, and the mom, and this girl can't find her body at all. I mean, every primitive reflex, Schomburg's fail. I was like, wow. And she's 5 years old, and mom's like, she has food intolerances, she has GI issues, and she's like, I was going to put on the special, dietary. I don't know exactly what it was, and I was like, no, hold on, let's not start there. Let's get this brain and body connected, and then we can work on that, because it's not that those things aren't that they're bad, but you get most of the parents I have come in there that they try dietary stuff, and I would say, maybe 1 in 5, 1 in 6 saw some mild improvement, and I'm like, well, I love that it helped, but you have to address this first. This is the linchpin here.
It's like what we say all the time. Why do they have those gut issues in the first place? And usually it's brain imbalance and lack of communication between the body and the brain. So yes, regardless of what kids' struggles are, get to the root of it. Why are they having anxiety? Why do they have poor self-esteem? Why are they being labeled as lazy or task avoidant or defiant or just difficult, or controlling or obsessive? There is a reason that is happening. You got to ask why, or else we're just putting in on symptoms. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
And
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we got a little just so I'm helping you. One thing I want you to go back and talk about is the galant reflex. So tell me how, because I found this on this little girl, and I know about it with bedwetting and other things, but talk about how this primitive reflex impacts the GI system.
Yeah, and so the spinal galant, just for everyone, is anything that stimulates the lower back, stimulates the hips, and that you can imagine if you still have the spinal galant present. When I'm sitting in school, that the chair is stimulating me. A lot of these kids even have trouble sitting still for meals. Forget about the fact that a lot of the meds decrease their appetite, or they're not absorbing the foods very well. And there have been studies that show that when you have the spinal galant, you don't get into those deep restorative stages of sleep that you need for body and brain development. The bedwetting. So, but the GI, I don't, it's really rare, especially unless it's mild or something. But even then we want to get rid of it. I don't know that I've ever seen a child who had it to a moderate to severe level and did not have some sort of GI issues. And sometimes the parents say no initially because it's the frog in the frying pan again,
Yeah.
So getting rid of that helps sleep, digestion. A lot of kids who have done everything else to be potty trained, and maybe they are during the day, but then not as during the night, several times a week, and that takes care of it. And these are the kids with squiggly, a lot of times they can't sit still. They're just fidgeting all the time. And sometimes they're also sensitive to tags or seams. Clothing is too tight or too loose, or this material doesn't feel right. It really can cause a lot of tactile sensitivity with socks and shoes and clothes as well.
Absolutely. I don't know why. I think I need to say something. I'll be 1 second. Sorry.
He's leaving me by myself. But yeah, so executive function, when you think about all of the brain communicating, if you have kids who have sensory motor issues, we've talked before about how the cerebellum, which is the command central of the motor system, communicates with your prefrontal cortex right behind your forehead, where we grow our sense of self. If I don't have a sense of self, how do I even know what I do care about? Sometimes mental health is sometimes it's not being overwhelmed. Sometimes it's utter lack of, it is apathy, because there's a level of despair. I have lost a lot of members of my family recently. It is normal to cry. It is normal to be sad and to grieve. That is sadness based on circumstances. That is not the same thing as a perpetual, you can't even cry. There aren't tears. There is a level of despair that is not sadness. That is an ongoing, I don't know who I am. I'm disconnected. I don't know how to process information. I'm not able to go around setbacks. And that's what we're talking about.
They're not handcuffed really as far as their ability to see themselves and their environment and everything else. And I read it was last year, they did some research and they found that, because we're talking about this body-brain connection, right? They found that the more a individual is disconnected from their body, so a lack of proprioception, the more their amygdala lit up, so their emotional center. So we have all this kind of emotional dysregulation, the inability to understand ourselves, to understand our environment and the impact that we have, in and out of it, and others' influence on that. And so they really have a difficulty like parceling out what is truth and what is not truth in their worlds, which is, from a mental health standpoint is a lot, right? They don't have the ability to do this, unfortunately.
Right. And there are a lot of research studies on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And it's like if you're exposed to 4 or more, 5 or more, 6 or more, the differences in mental health and physiological health outcomes, the longevity suffers. So we have kids who are actually exposed to trauma. We also have to understand that even kids observing trauma, even if abuse is not done toward them, but they observe it, that is traumatic. And that's important to realize. It's important to realize that in neglect, there are a lot of studies that suggest that neglect is one of the worst forms of abuse. It's like abuse is not just about hitting someone. It is about it's about lack of engagement, neglect and which it can be physical needs. The boys I took in were neglected in every imaginable way. I mean, they were in a home by themselves with no food and not going to school for years. It's kind of amazing how they even survived, and they were just emaciated and over 3 years behind in school, it's not about grades. It's just about they were not being nurtured and given opportunities for development. So we have that, but then we have what you said where, and we say this every time, but I just think it bears repeating in this context as well. What you were saying about the amygdala, that's the guard dog of the brain. And if you have sensory motor issues and you are, the kids who are covering their ears, or the visual perception, they feel like they live in a 3D movie, or their visual focus is so narrow, they don't know somebody's coming until they're right in front of them. You're going to live in a horror flick, just across all of the sensory systems. Your brain behaves as if you've been through trauma, even if you have not. They are not being drama kings and queens. They are in fight or flight mode. And, and so when the guard dog just captures that information and hijacks it, if you have kids where you're saying, what's wrong, or how are you feeling, and they can't come up with the words, especially a lot of kids don't have a language delay. They're super articulate on any other topic, except when it comes to how are you feeling? Why are you feeling that way? What happened? What has you upset? Think about the fact that when the guard dog, the amygdala just captures and hijacks that information, it doesn't go to the hippocampus for memory storage. And there's most recent studies, a lot of brain pictures online don't say language in that area. But recent studies show that the hippocampus is very responsible for language. So if you're already having difficulty with emotional quotient, and then the information doesn't go there in the first place, that's going to absolutely impact their ability. That is telling you that something's wrong. A lot of times parents think that, and I get this, they think that the kids are being evasive. They won't talk to me about what's wrong. It's, they won't or they can't. Those are two different things.
Right.
And of course, there's some of both in the world. A teenage girl may not want to talk about her breakup with mom and dad right that minute, but a lot of times if it's a perpetual thing, that tells you something's wrong. Yeah. And then the information, the prefrontal cortex, where you have your self-regulation, your inhibition, your flexible thinking, and not to mention all the organization, time management, prioritizing. Have you seen that documentary on 9/11 where this lady had a photographic memory? I mean, and I saw they tested her. She would look at all these numbers for a few seconds, and then she could call out hundreds or thousands of numbers. There is 0% chance I could do that. But even no way. And on 9/11, she has a false memory. She remembers all of these things about 9/11, and the reason is there was a chance that some of her loved ones were in those buildings. And so she went into a fight or flight mode, and she vividly recalled things that did not happen. Yeah. And that is the guard dog, the amygdala, messing up the encoding of the memory. It is not a memory issue with her. It is because the emotion got involved. And so I think that's another thing is if our kids are telling us things that for one way or another we know they're not quite accurate. Do kids lie? Yes. But also just keeping in mind that it might be a memory that truly is encoded differently. And another thing that we want to be sure we don't unintentionally do, we want to teach them morals. And so that's important. But if we don't know the fact that the amygdala in the fight or flight can make me remember things incorrectly, and I'm being called a liar when in my heart and soul I am not lying, that's another thing that can really break down communication and give them really mess with their sense of self even more.
Yeah, that was some powerful stuff to unpack there. So let's be clear on something. The autonomic nervous system, or also called the fight or flight, it has two parts. So the fight or flight, and then the rest and relaxation. Okay,
that's where people think they're being lazy. They're resting and digesting.
No. So it's just whether or not you're getting up and going, right? Like your sympathetic system kicks on in the morning to get you up, get you motivated. And then there's times when you eat and it comes down, and there's this nice ebb and flow back and forth of this two halves of the one system. But that system whether something happens to you directly, punch in the face, or it's just on, you can perceive threats. It doesn't actually have to happen to you physically. Your brain just is in that fight or flight mode, and so you can get locked into something, maybe a scenario that in the broad scheme of things, if your brain and body are functioning properly, was not a big deal. But if your guard dog's on and he's barking, you're going to perceive it as a big deal to you. And so, two kids, one guard dog's on, the other one's not, and you're going to get a conflict in there, and they're both going to think they're right, and they're both going to see the same exact situation and scenario played out in completely different. And I think you touched on.
And how does that make you?
Yeah. And then one kid gets villainized, right? Not intentionally, but as being perceived as a liar, right? Because maybe you as the parent or the teacher saw this interaction, but that kid still thinks that they're telling the truth. They're not lying. They believed what they saw. That's how their brain was working. And so that's a huge point. That's a huge, huge point.
Yeah. From the actual perception standpoint, like he just came up on me aggressively, that might be visual perception, or the way I encode a memory based on physical or trauma, abuse, neglect, or misperceiving it, being in a fight or flight, and it impacting the way it's coded. Yeah, there's so many different things that get in the way there. And so, I've just seen this play out, and kids will open up to us and not the parents. And then it's my job I'm glad they open it to us, but it's very important for them to have that relationship with their parents. And it's always well-meaning. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to stand by and let my kid be a liar. I'm teaching them morals, but it just comes from a place of them not knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just been really top of mind to me. That whether it's veterans, kids, that I was looking at suicide statistics the other day, and they're just continue to rise, and we just have to get awareness out there.
Absolutely. So I think one of the big things that, as we're talking about, because we're talking about mental health. Oh my gosh, I am struggling. I need more coffee, I think. We need to, when we're looking at our kids and their mental health, because I'm reading stories of like an 8-year-old who's taking their life, and I'm like, how is this even remotely possible? Like, what 8-year-old would think that or perceive that? Like, from my mind, because I'm not in that little kid's, seat. I'm not in their life. I don't understand their exact circumstances. But when you look at your kids, we need to start looking at them through the lens of development and understanding, and looking at, are there signs? Is there a canary in the coal mine giving us the alert that something's wrong? Like whether we have emotional control issues, whether or not our memories are being altered, and we're like, that's not what happened, but they're saying that it is. And just looking at the kid as a whole is so huge, because I think, unfortunately, our society as a whole is very far behind on this. And so we as business owners, as practitioners, and as parents need to start looking, this is what's happening, because it's not happening in the school system. It's not. The school system, in my opinion, seems to be getting worse and less understanding. I have a bunch of loving parents that are coming in, but they're very confused as to why this is happening. And they're seeing little bits and pieces of it, but they're not seeing the grand picture. And so this conversation it's vital. If you're watching this right now, please share this, because I guarantee you there's 1 or 2 or 4 parents out there in your network that needs to hear this. Their kiddo is struggling, and they need help. And it's not, they're liars. They're not, it's none of this stuff. It's a canary in a coal mine. That's the best way. If you don't know what that is, you need to look it up. But coal miners used to bring canaries in, and it was their warning system. If the canary died, because the canary is more to, that was get out of town. And I'm seeing a ton of canaries, but there's no connection here. So, I'm emotionally exhausted right now. I'm a little amped up.
This is a
And
different conversation we normally have. It's a little more somber today, but I think it's so important.
no, absolutely. It's just I've had quite a few kids come in this week, and it just lots of disconnects all around. And I'm not blaming anybody. It's just, when you care about these kids and you want what's best for them, and you see the school system failing them, and you see teachers, and I'm not blaming teachers and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying you're seeing it. It's taxing on you just because you're like, I just want the best for them. Like I want to, like I wish I could give them a pill and magically make it better. And I know that's not the answer, but you want them to, be back to who I know they are as an individual and a kid.
Yeah. And, we talked about growth mindset last time and character growth and development. And so there are just such simple things. But number one, as we said, if they have issues with their sensory motor system, that absolutely does impact growing a sense of self and a sense of identity. So we have to make sure those things are gone. Assuming that those things are okay, even with kids who aren't showing overt signs of issues, it is such a good idea if I could grant one wish to the world, it would honestly be for every child to journal. And even the little ones, if they are too young to write, they can cut out pictures. They're getting good fine motor work with that, which, by the way, grows attention and self-regulation, which is part of identity. But, look at growth mindset where we're separating what they do from who they are. When you do hard things, your brain grows. This week, my favorite activity was this, because have them fill in those blanks. My least favorite activity was blank, because why? You are helping them learn who they are. And I did my best work this week on this. I could have tried harder on this. So we are helping them understand we all have strengths, weaknesses, and it's okay. We accept you for who you are, not for what you do. That you're teaching them perspective, which later on translates into avoiding that all or nothing thinking and the quote unquote making a mountain out of a molehill thing that a lot of those ruts of thinking. Journaling is so powerful. Have a gratitude journal. I mean, of course, that sounds good and everybody wants to be grateful, but it goes beyond that. It is part of our brain development and our character development. It helps give kids perspective. And so just nurturing that, whether or not kids are showing issues right now, you might be avoiding some big pitfalls down the road by doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was some great tips. So I think one of the big things is, like you talked about, like being grateful, walking the kid, asking them how they feel and encouraging to talk about that, I think is huge. Because and having them kind of relay the story of what they saw and what they experienced and letting them relive it so that they can start connecting those dots together, I think is absolutely massive.
And reading stories related to, if you have something going on in your life, there are so many stories that you can read to connect the dots. Publishers Weekly sometimes puts out really good books. Free Spirit has amazing social emotional books on a variety of topics. There are really good sources out there. Read stories to help them understand what's going on and ask them, and you, even if you don't have something specific going on right now, still read topical stories where everything is not just sunshine. They write books at an appropriate level. Even with some of the terrorist activities and all, there have been books that have come out. They never even say what the thing was, but they're talking about how all of the adults are acting funny. I know something's wrong. They don't realize I understand it. And I just there are books that are very subtle, that are good ways to talk about all kinds of topics. But any story you read that has like a moral to it, what was the problem? What was the solution? How do you think they handled it? Have you ever faced anything like that? How did you feel? What would you do differently next time? You are teaching them prediction, cause effect, inferencing. You're working on their executive function, and that is completely related also to how we handle life. And those are just such important ways to you also can grow I'm talking to educators about this all the time, about how you incorporate social, emotional, relational development into the curriculum. But it's great to do it at home too.
Yes, absolutely. And our brains love stories. So again, yeah, just reading these stories, having them tell their story, you talking to them in a story-like manner. It's just what our brains like. We like stories. It gives us context and ability to kind of see the picture. And so, yes, I love that. That's awesome. I love that. Okay. Well, this was a tougher episode for us to talk, or at least to talk about. I get kind of passionate about this stuff, and I just hate to see these kids struggle. And so, talking about proprioception and body movement easy, but when they struggle mentally, it does take a toll on me. But let's each share a story, a win, something exciting that we can end with and share with some people. So I'll go first. How about that?
Right.
There you go. So I had this little girl come in. She started care like 2.5 weeks ago. This was a little one who, can't find her body for the life of her. She didn't pass a single test that I did, all neurological primitive reflexes, and found the Galant reflex on her. And she started her care, and she's been on care for 2 weeks now. And I said, how's she doing? Are we noticing some changes? And she said, you know what? She hasn't wet her bed anymore. Well, 1 out of, whatever the past few weeks. So huge win every night to 1. And then she also said her emotional control was notably better. She said there was instances where I thought she would, yell at me or, just kind of lose control. And she's started to start self-regulating. So obviously the time change was a little impactful on her. So, but overall, this mom and this little girl had been in OT for 1.5 years. Changes within 2 weeks. So, not that I have anything against OT. I'm just excited to see these changes impact these little lives for the better. All right, that's my win. I'm super excited for this little girl. She's got me all motivated. Let's hear a win from you.
Okay, this win is not brand new. It's a continuing win though, but based on self-esteem and how kids feel about themselves. I've told stories about younger kids. I want to tell this time a story about a 16-year-old girl who came in to see us. She was failing most of her classes. She wanted to get her driver's license, and her parents said, "I know she's not safe to get it. I don't know why. We just know that something's amiss." And sure enough, the motor, visual perception and processing, equilibrium, body, spatial concepts were really in the way. The first day, the parents said, she loved y'all right away, and she's going to love coming to sessions, but there's no way she's going to do her home program. I said, oh, yes, she will. Because they said, why? What are you going to do? I said, we always sit down with the kids because we have to get their buy-in. What matters to them? And I'm going to speak their language. And so I sat down with her, and she was the sweetest girl, but she wasn't making good decisions. She just wasn't able to at that point about who she was dating and her friends. And she had not great relationships with her parents, and they were all amazing. So there wasn't any bad going on there whatsoever. They're wonderful people. But I went through and I said, do you know why your mom and dad have you here? And she's just like, no, they're on my case all the time. And, they want me to make better grades, whatever. I said, well, how long is it taking you to do homework each night? And she said like 5 or 6 hours. I said, what if I told you that by doing the home program that goes with this program, you can probably cut that down to 2 to a couple hours a night, make the same grades or even better, get your parents off your case, just talking teen language. It's like, really? And I showed her the parts that would help her, why she couldn't get her driver's license. I showed her what would make her a better, volleyball player. And the parents said, I don't know what you said to her, but every day she walks in, how was your day? Don't have time to talk. Got to go do my brain balance exercises. And so at the end of her program, she left a beautiful letter on my desk about she cannot even wrap her brain around what a different person she feels like. Just on every level, she was making her relationships were mended with her parents. She had was no longer friends with the girls who were not looking out for her best interest. She got a job. She got her driver's license, but she asked if she could volunteer at the center because she wanted to give back and mentor kids going through the program. And of course, I got permission from the parents, and She did that. Well, I continued to work with her on breaking the ruts of thinking that we talked about that develop. And so she walked in one day. She said, Miss Heather, she said, I feel like a brand new person. She said, there's just one thing. I said, what is it? She said, I'm still stupid. And I said, I'm gonna tell you a story. I said, when I went to college at one school, I decided to go to a different college for graduate school because I wanted to be exposed to new information from different professors, even though I loved my other school. That way I could take information from over here and over here, put it together for when I'm lucky enough to work with people just like you. I said, on the first day of class, pop test, and I bombed it. And of course it was based on the undergrad program. And I said, do you think I said that the advisor called me into his office, told me, Heather, you'll never make it. This is a super hard program. Very few make it, and you'll be the first who doesn't. Just save us a lot of time and quit. I said, do you think I was stupid because I failed that test? And she said, no, of course not. You'd never been exposed to the information. That's why you were there in the first place. And I said, and neither are you. I said, in a lot of ways, your brain is being exposed to information for the very first time due to no fault of your own. You've been sitting in class all of these years, and your classmates are building on knowledge they've gotten all along. You're being exposed to it for the first time. The difference is now you can do it. You're just going to have to work a little harder. I said, what I did is I borrowed books from a friend of mine who went to the undergrad program where we were doing our graduate work. And I was having to learn their information while I was doing the graduate program. And I said, and her entire countenance changed. She practically skipped out of that office, and both of her parents reached out and they said, every minute you share with her is so special. Whatever happened today was the turning point of her life. And sure enough, and it's not about grades, it was about she was doing her best. In her senior year, she made straight A's. And she is now in her second year of college studying to work with kids who have the kinds of challenges we work with. So that's a win.
That's a huge win. That's going to impact multiple lives. That's insane. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good story. I like that story. That one's good. Those are both good stories.
Yeah.
So events. Do you have any events coming up?
In a couple of weeks, the 26th, Mansfield and South Lake are doing free reading assessments. And so that's pretty cool. And if the slots fill up, let us know and we'll fit that in. That's something, and it's not just learning to read, it's reading to learn. So we're going to look at some executive function with that. We're going to look at visual perception, several things. There's so many factors that play in to, do kids really get the meat and guts of what they're reading or just the surface level? And so you can reach out to Mansfield at brainbalance.com or Southlake at brainbalance.com to reserve your slot. We haven't done that in quite some time, so it's good.
I think I saw that on Facebook
tonight. Sorry.
Yes, I do have an event tonight. Yes. So I have an event called Decoding Neurodevelopmental Disorders, where I'll kind of, a lot of what we talked about, but I'll go in a little bit more in depth, and we'll talk about, why we're seeing this, the numbers we're seeing, all of that fun stuff. It's a great talk. I love giving it. And then I also have another talk on the 28th. So that's a Saturday. That's the last Saturday of the month at 11 o'clock. So if you would like to come to either of those, same talk, please let me know the Eventbrite link. So they can find your events on Facebook, and they can reach out to you as well?
Facebook. Yes, you can reach out to me, HWells, WELLS, at brainbalance.com, or you can check us out on Facebook. We also have a center in Katy, in case anybody in Houston's watching this, and we're doing free reading screenings there on the 24th instead of the 26th. But Katy at brainbalance.com if you're in Houston by chance.
So reach out to Heather. She has centers in Houston and in the DFW area. If you're DFW and you're near me, give me a shout out. I'll send you the invite to Eventbrite. Anything you want to leave these parents with? Any thoughts?
No, just be proactive. Don't wait until the struggles. We're chasing moving targets with emotional growth and development as well as academic sense of identity. be proactive, cut it off at the pass so that you're not facing the issues of the families that we're dealing with, is what I would say.
Yes. And to tell you on to that, and I know you'd agree with me because we've talked about this multiple times, parents, if you suspect something is going on, if your gut is telling you something is going on and you're being ignored, or they're throwing it under the rug and saying this is not an issue, reach out to us. Look, we hear this all the time. If your gut's telling you there's something going on, you're most likely right. And we can help you and give you some answers. All right. Thank you so much, Heather. I always appreciate our talks. We struggled to get on, but we got on. We had a difficult conversation, but it was a much needed conversation. Thank you so much. And Heather and I will be probably jumping on again in about another month. And for that. All right. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank y'all. Bye.